So, thousands of years ago, a man was asked to prove his ultimate devotion to the creator of the universe. And, the stakes literally could not be higher for him.
Right. It's this moment of profound psychological and, frankly, spiritual agony, just an intense scenario.
Exactly. And to help him execute this ultimate test of faith, God gave him, wait for it, a sheep.
Yeah. Not a miraculous chariot of fire or anything.
Right. Not an endless, luxurious feast to sustain his strength, just a sheep. And when you really step back and look at these ancient religious narratives, the specific details can feel almost, I don't know, absurd, or at least wildly counterintuitive.
Well, it is entirely counterintuitive, right? Especially if you're looking at it through a modern, purely utilitarian lens. I mean,
Yeah.
we are sort of wired to expect grand cinematic interventions when we think of the divine.
Yeah, we want the lightning bolts and the parting seas.
Exactly. But when you examine the architecture of these ancient theological narratives, you quickly realize that absolutely nothing is arbitrary. Like the specific objects, the exact environments, the mundane details, they're all load-bearing structures in a much larger philosophical framework.
Which is exactly what we are doing today for you, the listener. We are taking a deep dive into an intriguing set of notes titled Divine Provision and the Test of Ibrahim's Faith. We're really tearing down the assumptions around one of the most famous tests of faith in human history.
Yeah, the moment Ibrahim is gifted a lamb to sacrifice.
Right. Our mission today is to explore the profound mechanics behind divine provision. We want to answer a question that, honestly, it sounds like a joke at first, but it actually unlocks a massive theological puzzle.
And that question is, why a lamb?
Exactly. If the creator of all reality is going to provide you with something during a moment of crisis, why not provide something incredible? Like, why not a massive, delicious feast?
The implications of that exact question are staggering, honestly.
Yeah.
Because to answer it, you have to fundamentally redefine what a provision actually is.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you have to separate the idea of a spiritual instrument from, a worldly indulgence.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can debate the merits of a lamb versus a luxury banquet, we have to establish the ground rules of the scenario itself. We need to look at the mechanism of the test.
Right, the foundation.
Yeah. And in Islamic theology, there is a very specific concept for this, right? It's called ibtila.
Yes, ibtila, which essentially translates to the testing or the trial of faith. But, and this is crucial, we need to divorce that from our everyday understanding of a test.
How so? Like, how is it different from a school test?
Well, think about it. When you take a math test, the teacher is trying to find out what you know because they don't have access to your brain.
Right.
They need the data.
Right. They need to see your work on the paper.
Exactly. But from a theological standpoint, God is omniscient. God already knows the depth of Ibrahim's faith. So the test is not a discovery mechanism for the creator.
Wait, but that presents a massive philosophical paradox, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, if the creator already knows the outcome and already knows exactly what is in Ibrahim's heart, what is the utility of forcing him to go through the physical, agonizing motions of the act? Like, why make him do it?
Because the utility is entirely for the human being.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ibtila isn't about God discovering something, It's about the individual actualizing something. Because potential faith is just that. It's potential. It's totally abstract.
It's just a thought in your head until you act on it.
Precisely. True faith in this theological framework requires an agonizing transition from the internal abstract to the external reality. The test is the crucible where that transition happens. It forces the individual to physically manifest their submission.
I want to visualize the mechanics of that for a second. Think of it like a master sculptor handing an apprentice a very specific, heavy chisel.
Right? Okay, I like where this is going.
The master already knows the apprentice has the theoretical knowledge to carve the stone. But theoretical knowledge doesn't move rock.
No, it doesn't.
So the master provides the chisel, the instrument, but the chisel doesn't carve the statue. The apprentice has to pick it up, feel the weight of it, and make the agonizing, repetitive choices to strike the stone.
That captures the dynamic beautifully. Because the physical object, the lamb, in Ibrahim's case, is essentially a blank canvas. Or, in your analogy, the chisel.
It's just a tool.
Right. It is an entirely neutral object that demands a choice.
Yeah.
And the psychological burden here is immense. By providing the lamb, God removes the abstract nature of the command.
It makes it real.
Very real. It is no longer a philosophical thought experiment about obedience. The object is standing right in front of you. You have to do something with it.
The internal made external. The reality of the object forces the reality of the choice. It's not about the mechanics of the sacrifice itself. It's about absolute reliance on God rather than worldly attachments. But, and I have to push back on this setup a little bit.
Ooh, let's hear it.
There is a glaring issue with the logistics here, I think.
Okay, what's the issue?
If the entire purpose of Abtila is to force the human being to make a staggeringly difficult active choice to submit, why does God hand them the exact means to do it?
I see what you're getting at.
Yeah, like if the tools are literally handed to you, doesn't that compromise the integrity of the test? It feels like putting up the bumper lanes at a bowling alley. If the path is perfectly paved and the logistics are handled for you, where's the actual sacrifice?
You're saying it's too easy.
Exactly. Why not require Ibrahim to go out into the unforgiving wilderness and, I don't know, track down his own offering?
What's fascinating here is your intuition about the bumper lanes assumes that the exertion of tracking the animal is the point of the test.
Well, isn't it? Doesn't the struggle make it more meaningful?
It assumes the divine test is fundamentally about human capability or physical endurance. But providing the means actually elevates the purity of the spiritual test. It brings us to the concept of amana.
Okay, amana, which is the concept of covenant and trust, right?
Yes.
But how does handing someone the solution build trust? It seems like it bypasses the struggle entirely.
We have to differentiate between a secular contract and a divine covenant here.
Okay.
In a secular contract, everything is transactional. You do X, you receive Y. But a divine covenant, however, is a profoundly relational, two-way bond of trust.
That's a relationship.
Exactly. When God asks a prophet to perform an act of ultimate submission, God ensures that the path of obedience isn't practically impossible. By providing the literal means to fulfill the command, the Lamb God is demonstrating his own commitment to that covenant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he provides a floor so the human being can take the lead.
Let me see if I am grasping the distinction here. If Ibrahim had to spend weeks hunting, dealing with exposure, starvation, and the sheer physical mechanics of survival in the wilderness, the variable of the test changes completely.
Drastically. It stops being a test of spiritual submission and becomes a test of wilderness survival.
Right. If he fails to find a lamb, did he fail the spiritual test of obedience, or did he just get unlucky on a hunting trip?
Exactly.
So by providing the lamb directly, God eliminates every single logistical variable. He strips away every possible excuse.
He isolates the variable. There is no physical barrier to point to. There is no logistical complication to hide behind. The only thing left in the equation is the human heart.
It's just you and the choice.
The individual is left utterly alone with their own agency. The bumper lanes, to use your analogy again, they don't roll the ball. They just ensure the ball goes exactly where you direct it.
That is such a good point.
God takes care of the material logistics. So Ibrahim is forced to confront the absolute, unadulterated weight of the spiritual choice.
That completely flips my understanding of a difficult test. The provision doesn't make it easier, it makes it inescapable.
You can't blame the environment. You can't blame a lack of resources.
The simplicity of the provision creates a hyper-focused purity of worship.
Purity is the exact right word. Because if you look across various historical religious traditions, you often see humans introducing incredibly elaborate rituals.
Oh yeah, complex choreography, golden chalices, massive infrastructural demands.
Right, because people love complexity. We tend to think that if an act of worship is complicated and requires massive logistical coordination, it must be more holy.
We conflate difficulty with divinity, but usually people just start obsessing over polishing the chalice instead of focusing on their relationship with the divine.
They fall in love with the mechanism rather than the meaning. But the pure, simple act of submission is infinitely more profound. There are no bells and whistles in Ibrahim's test. Just the command, the provided means, and the agonizing human choice.
Which leads us directly into the massive, colorful paradox at the center of today's deep dive. We have established why God isolates the variable by providing the specific tool.
Oh, why that specific tool?
Yes. If you are the architect of reality and you are going to miraculously provide something for your servant in a moment of intense trial, why provide something so demanding?
The biryani conundrum.
Yes. Why a raw animal that requires exertion and difficult action? Why not provide a magnificent, perfectly prepared feast? Like, why not a massive biryani, or to use another cultural framework, something resembling the Last Supper?
I mean, it sounds almost comical, right, to picture a massive, steaming platter of biryani just appearing in the middle of this intense ancient narrative.
He totally does.
But intellectually, it is a brilliant stress test for our definitions of divine grace.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Hmm.
Because if we look at this through the lens of everyday human behavior, we can see the mechanism clearly. It is the difference between a guide handing you a highly calibrated compass when you are lost in a dark forest versus a luxury helicopter dropping down to airlift you out.
That's a great way to frame it, because both are technically provisions from a higher authority that intervene in your crisis.
Right, but they demand entirely different things from you. The compass is an instrument. It doesn't physically move you a single inch.
You still have to walk.
You still have to hack your way through the brush. You have to endure the cold. You have to rely on your own resolve. It just points true north. The helicopter, on the other hand, bypasses your agency entirely. It requires nothing but your passive consumption of its comfort.
And that distinction maps perfectly onto the theological framework we're dissecting here. There is a rigid boundary between two categories of provision, instrumental and material.
Okay, let's break those down.
We need to understand them to see why the biryani was never an option.
Let's start with the compass. Let's look at the lamb as an instrumental provision.
Okay, so an instrumental provision is not designed for worldly enjoyment. Its utility is entirely theological.
It's functional.
Right. It exists in the narrative strictly as a tool for a spiritual and moral lesson. The lamb is provided to refine character, to facilitate an act of obedience, and to confirm the covenant.
So it is heavy, it requires dirty work, and it demands exertion.
Because the exertion is the point. The friction builds the spiritual muscle. The lamb is the compass. It points Ibrahim toward ultimate submission, but he still has to walk the excruciating path to get there.
Okay, so let's contrast that with the material offering. The helicopter, the massive feast, the biryani.
These are material provisions?
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. When you sit down to a lavish, multi-course feast, what are the defining characteristics of that experience?
Well, it's about sensory indulgence, mostly.
Yes, it is about bodily sustenance and immediate worldly satisfaction.
It feels good. It spikes your dopamine. It gives you immediate relief from the harshness of the world.
And structurally, material offerings are horizontal.
Horizontal.
Yeah, they're deeply tied to social bonding, communal celebration, and cultural rights. They connect humans to other humans and humans to the physical pleasures of the earth.
Wait, I have to pause there. Isn't that inherently a good thing? Like fostering horizontal relationships, bringing communities together, celebrating the bounty of the earth? I mean, most religious traditions heavily promote those exact behaviors.
They absolutely do.
So why would that be a negative in the context of Ibrahim's test?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the specific concept of ibadah.
Ibadah meaning worship or ultimate servitude.
Correct. In Islamic theology, true, unadulterated ibadah is vertical. It is directed entirely and exclusively upward toward the Creator.
Not horizontal toward other people.
Right. The moment of ibtila, the test, requires absolute vertical focus. Now let's inject human psychology into this scenario. Human nature is overwhelmingly predictable, right? We are driven by biology and sensory input.
Definitely.
So if God had provided a magnificent feast in that moment, what happens to Ibrahim's consciousness?
It completely fractures. I mean, if you are exhausted and under immense psychological stress and suddenly there is incredible food in front of you, your biology just takes the wheel.
It overrides everything.
The smell, the anticipation, the immediate relief, your sensory experience hijacks your brain.
The focus instantaneously shifts from the provider to the provision. The human mind becomes completely enchanted by the creation, turning its back on the Creator.
Wow.
And you mentioned the horizontal nature of a feast earlier. If a miraculous banquet appeared, the natural human instinct is to invite others, right?
Yeah.
To share it, to build social capital, to celebrate.
The intense vertical isolation of the test is shattered by horizontal distraction.
The indulgence of the worldly pleasure acts as an anesthetic.
Oh, that's good. It numbs the acute awareness required for the act of submission.
Anesthetic is the perfect metaphor, because the spiritual test requires Ibrahim to be hyperconscious, fully present in the agony of his choice. A material indulgence numbs that presence.
It puts you to sleep, spiritually speaking.
Exactly. By providing the lamb an instrumental provision that demands action rather than offering passive consumption, God ensures the focus remains entirely locked on the act of obedience.
It completely redefines the concept of a gift from God. Like, the provision isn't about satisfying human appetites or offering a temporary vacation from reality.
Not at all.
It is laser-focused on establishing and testing the structural integrity of the relationship between the servant and the divine.
It is a theological provision,
Yeah.
intricately designed to forge righteous character. God provided the necessary means for obedience, purposefully withholding the indulgence of worldly pleasure. Because comfort does not build absolute faith, action does.
So what does this all mean for you? When we take these massive ancient theological concepts like ibtila, amana, instrumental versus material provision, and we bring them down into your everyday reality, it fundamentally alters how you view the resources in your own life.
It really does. It demands a total reevaluation of what you consider a blessing and what you consider a distraction.
Exactly. When you find yourself in a challenging situation, look closely at the means you've been given. Look at the resources, the relationships, the tools sitting right in front of you.
Are you angry because you are looking for a helicopter to airlift you out of your discomfort?
Right, when you've actually been handed a perfectly calibrated compass. Are the things in your hands right now instrumental tools meant for a profound test of your character? Or are they just material distractions keeping you from doing the deeply uncomfortable work required to grow?
This raises an important question, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, because our entire discussion hinges on the idea that material comfort, the luxurious feast, the helicopter, acts as an anesthetic. It shifts our focus from the vertical pursuit of meaning to the horizontal consumption of pleasure. It numbs our awareness of the test.
And let's be honest, we would absolutely take the anesthetic every single time if given the choice.
Oh, human nature practically guarantees it.
Yeah.
Which leads to a fairly unsettling thought experiment about our current reality.
Unsettling how?
Well, look at the architecture of the modern world. We are living in an era of unprecedented algorithmic abundance. We are surrounded by an endless 24/7 feast of comfort.
That's true.
We have unlimited entertainment engineered to spike our dopamine right in our pockets. We have instant material provision and constant sensory indulgence delivered right to our front doors with the click of a button.
We are constantly being airlifted away from boredom, from silence, from struggle.
Exactly. So if a single luxurious feast in the ancient desert was enough of a psychological hazard to derail a profound spiritual test, what does that mean for us? Has our sheer, inescapable abundance of worldly indulgence, our constant access to the anesthetic of comfort, actually made it profoundly harder for us to even recognize the simple tests of character when they appear?